Hello, welcome to the second edition of Perspectives on the Journey. It was 4 years ago, back in 2017, that we recorded the first session. It was part of an online leadership course focused on the future. Three very distinct aspects of that future. The second piece of that discussion focused on rehearsing the future. As mentioned, we can't predict it, but we can consistently and iteratively rehearse it in ways that show us or illuminate paths forward. It was Hassan El-Buhali, Head of Technology at the MasterCard Foundation, and Ananth Krishnan, TCS CTO, that joined me for that conversation back then. I'm encouraged that Ananth and Hassan were as excited as I am to actually have the conversation again, reflect on the past, and think about the future. And so welcome along with me, Hassan and Ananth. So welcome, Hassan and Ananth. It's a pleasure to have you back. I can't wait to have this conversation again.
Thank you, Frank.
So for the audience, if you remember back in 2017, we talked about perspectives on the journey. It was all about the future, where the world was going, and the practical implications of that to organizations. So what we thought we'd do, and Hassan, it was you that mentioned this, is reflect back on that 2017 discussion and then think about what the world would look like in 4 years from now. Let's shift to the second one, which is really rehearsing that future. And I like using rehearsing because I think looking at possible futures is the only way to understand paths or potential paths. And understanding those paths allow us to act at some level towards constructing a very positive future. So we talked back then about rehearsing and the kinds of things that really play into that. Let's have that conversation again, but now again with that lens on 2025. What do we see in the rehearsing category? And this time I'll start with you, Hassan.
Yeah. On the rehearsing side, I came across something super interesting a few months ago. It was actually the ING Bank in the Netherlands CEO talking and describing their strategic planning process. And it struck me how that organization gets it from a rehearsal proposal. So as an organization, companies will have to define a long shot. Here is what we want to be in 5-10 years from now. That needs to be there. It becomes the Northern Star of the organization. And most organizations have that already. But then when you start building a strategic plan, forget building a 3-year strategic plan, forget even 1 year strategic plan. You have to put one because you need to put some budget and some numbers for your financial reporting. So you have to put one. But the way I think organizations will manage the acceleration of the future is by having something basic to work on a yearly basis, but then review it on a quarterly basis. Every quarter, you have to rethink about it as reviewing your strategy, reviewing your strategic plan, reviewing your execution and implementation plan. Now, when you think about that, you say, well, that's almost impossible when you have assets that have 25 years life cycle, for example. You're managing plants that takes years to build, and you're managing operations that takes a generation to build and maintain and operate. How can you be changing your strategy every quarter? I think that's not the right way to look at it. The way to look at it is that we have an overarching plan for the next few years. We have a Northern Star for the next 10 years. But then we're open in our mind and our mindset, we're open to reviewing that and challenging that on a quarterly basis based on what's happening outside, using the ears and the eyes we have coming to us from internally from our organization, from our employees, and externally from our customers or from the market. And being able to rehearse and accept the fact that you may need to change your strategic plan regularly, a lot more than once per year or once per 5 years. I'll stop there.
That's great thought. Ananth?
From the rehearse perspective, a significant change that I witnessed in the last 4 years in TCS, and then now because of the pandemic and many of our customers, is this more or less an acceptance that this capability of rehearsing different scenarios and turning on a dime, so to speak, is a necessity. It's difficult to predict, and Hassan, you hit it on the head. Nobody's thinking about a 5-year program and saying I will deliver this in 2025 in one go. They are doing it in agile sprints. They're doing it in iterative development. They're being very, very adaptive with the way they're thinking about the technology and the business problem. And they really, changing literally every quarter, as you said. This was a IT capability. IT has known agile as a method for developing software for 20 years now. Now it is becoming something much more pervasive, and it's indeed in the innovation agenda as well. And in TCS, we have got this notion now in the last 1 year of what we call an agile innovation cloud. It marries three things. One, the iterative experimentation that technology is traditionally done with the short, rapid cycles. I talked about the way our incubation team inside TCS Research and Innovation uses this very effectively. That's now become standard, right? It's the way we are innovating with customers, with other stakeholders as well. Secondly, there is admittedly a huge partnering ecosystem play. Mm-hmm. So the physical spaceports that we are setting up, some of them are inside universities like Carnegie Mellon or Cornell Tech, and others are in hotspots like Toronto or in Amsterdam or in Tokyo. And it's a question of bringing stakeholders together so that the spirit of agile innovation can actually come to life. And in today's context of a large percentage of us working from home, the cloud part of it comes in, because now literally, people who are interested in a particular project for 30 days could just spend their time on it using technology to collaborate and drive the agenda forward. So agility, location independence, the ability to bring people together who are excited about a problem and its solution. All of these are part of that rehearse muscle that people are getting into the habit of. And even at the leadership and board levels, we are following those rituals, saying, what's your 30-day plan? What's your 60-day plan? What's your 90-day plan? And then we'll recalibrate next quarter. And it's becoming a way of life.
I love that, Anand. Exactly. And when I build on it, those concepts of lean startup concepts that we see already in IT and software industry, of continuous iteration, continuous agility, minimum viable product that you have to build, then you build on that minimum viable product and keep improving it over time, depending on the demand coming externally from the end user. So it's taking that concept and applying it to the strategic planning. And it's not intuitive, right? So it's not as simple as it sounds, but that's the challenge, I think, for the CEOs and for the executives in the next years, is to restructure that strategic planning to enable it to be agile enough to work that way. And that will take, to your point, you'll take another way of designing an ecosystem and partnerships with suppliers, with customers, etc., that are an ecosystem that is loosely coupled. So you can move things around and you can restructure those puzzles, these pieces of the puzzle, accordingly or in alignment with what's happening in the economic and the industrial environment.
So one more thought before moving on to the next topic, and just real quick perspective for both of you. The rehearse muscle, I like that enough in terms of visual. But do we believe the cultures of most organizations are there yet and are able to think about rehearsing and experimentation in the ways that they need to at the organization enterprise level? Well, Hassan, you've had a lot of experiences from IT organizations perspective. What are your thoughts there?
So my experience has been mainly in big organizations, right? So in various industries, and clearly the answer to that is no. It's not. That's not how strategic planning is done. And if we think about the best way to be ready to the future is by embedding futuristic thinking in the strategic plan. And if it is about embedding that agility we just talked about in the strategic plan, that's not how strategic planning, or that's not how I personally experience it in all the big corporations I worked for so far. This is something that I think you see in digital natives, in small organizations, but definitely not in the big ones. And it is a challenge, but culturally, structurally, but also when you think about it, to be agile that way, imagine the effort and the pressure that puts on your brains, on your executives' thinking effort and the mental framework to be able to work that way, to be able in such agile and deconstructed way. It's very difficult. And I think the recipe for that to work is to feed that strategic planning process continuously with good data. And here is now we're getting into the role of IT and data and analytics in feeding that strategic process efficiently in real time with good data that we can trust to enable that agility. that agility cannot be achieved with current culture, current system, current processes.
Yeah, very interesting. Anant, you talked to a lot of folks around the world. Your thoughts?
I think that's a very interesting. Agility requires us to take the right decisions much more frequently than in the traditional way. And good decisions can be taken only if you have good data underneath it, at least on what is happening, and then you can at least try to forecast and so on. I think it resonates very well with what I'm seeing. So there is this whole notion of benchmarking your data maturity as a necessary part of this agile enterprise. We even did some academic research on it, and then we have published a data maturity model, something like the CMM 5-level model. Data maturity level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They are very straightforward key performance indicators that let you know that you are at level 2 or you're at level 3, and here are things that you need to do to improve your maturity. A lot of our customers are interested in this. Why? Because I think they see the need now from a business perspective. It's no longer an interesting thing for the CIO to do. It's becoming a business-driven initiative that the corporate data office or sometimes the chief digital officer or the chief data officer is driving this as much as the CIO is championing it from the IT perspective. So I think the quality of data thing, completely with you. The other big driver, which I think is changing the minds of businesses to think in this agile way, links back to, Hassan, what you said in your first set of statements. The truly digital players, the big ones, are now seen as a viable factor in the strategic planning of almost every industry. The automotive industry no longer competes with the automotives. I mean, they compete with the newer players, the entertainment industry, the telecoms industry, the retail industry, the financial services industry. So when you have these well-defined swim lanes that, I'm a bank, I compete with other banks, this tech industry guy coming in and, swimming across the pool in a diagonal, suddenly it's very disruptive, right? So that's also putting a little bit of a fear of God into people saying, I can't do my traditional year-on-year, 5-year annual plan because, along comes someone who's going to disrupt my industry. So that's driving that need for agility as well.
Really well said. So I want to close with that. Thank you both yet again for this great discussion. And I look forward to the next one, Hassan and Anant. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thanks, Anant.
Thanks a lot.